Pull those feeds now, Commander. We've got an anomaly in the grave field. Nothing matches the archives. The deck of the Alliance flagship Harrow's Bastion lurched as the sensor crew scrambled to adjust their readings. The smell of warm electronics and sharpened steel bit at the back of every throat. Boots hammered the composite deck as officers traded datapads and breathless observations. Captain Jovan Thren, tall and broad-shouldered, pivoted from the central readout. His deep-set eyes tracked every shifting coordinate. "Report. What the hell is it?" Commander Rax Varlin keyed a command string into the nearest heads-up display, green and gold interface data flickering across his gloved hands. "Negative transponder, Captain. No registry, no known shape in the database. Mass reading, higher than a dreadnought." Thren's gloved fingers drummed the console. "Is it broadcasting anything at all?" Barty's brow furrowed. "Nothing. It's moving, or rather drifting. Trajectory doesn't conform to local grav wells. We're seeing gravitational shear but no propulsion trace." A low, clipped breath from the helmsman punctuated the air. "Captain, it's impossible. That sort of mass would have to show a burn signature or power surge. Instead, the readouts keep realigning themselves like they're recalibrating." Across the data streams, an image began to coalesce. Angular plating, rippling surface segments. Something that absorbed scanner pulses rather than reflecting them. A hull that defied the gentle arcs of Alliance shipbuilding. Thren reached for a comms relay. "Dispatch Recon Deltas 2, 3, and 4. Keep them linked. No lone approach. Tell them this is not a first contact scenario, but eyes only. We don't provoke." Confirmed. Varlin's voice sounded flat, his throat tightening as the sensor lines wavered again. "Alliance data libraries are rejecting classification outright. They're looping to null strings. I've never seen this before." A heartbeat of weighted air pressed down, not from any gravity fluctuation but from something older and unspoken. A collective sense that an interloper had arrived. Thren shifted his weight, hand clenching over his hip rail. "Patch me to the Alvaran 3 summit data. Cross-section anything that might have been left out of the core logs." Varlin worked his console, eyes flitting between columns of data. Alvaran 3's summit logs ended the same day Earth left. Every data feed from Sol was wiped from the Alliance's shared chart archives. Earth's sector has been dead since that day. Thren's jaw tightened. "I remember." He had been a junior officer then, one of many in a council chamber so polished and ceremonial that every footfall echoed in memory. The Terran delegation's final message had carried no flourish. "We will not trade away our birthright." Since then, Earth had been a blank sector in a sea of mapped stars. A rumor, a cautionary tale of defiance. Now something in the grave field had punctured that void. "Delta squadrons are en route," the helmsman confirmed, voice clipped and harsh. As the recon destroyers streaked toward the anomaly, Thren's gaze locked onto the primary display. No plasma shimmer, no reflection, just a shape moving without expression. He forced his voice steady. "Commander, keep your sensors trained and let no one else in that channel. We need to see this without the committees breathing down our necks." Varlin nodded once, eyes never leaving the telemetry. The Varnus family on Arendor watched through shaky, unauthorized relay feeds, images pieced together from local merchant broadcasts and old data caches. Yorick Varnus, shoulders stooped by years of half rations and Alliance embargoes, sat at the table with his son. The boy's eyes were bright, flickering with something he didn't dare name yet, something closer to belonging than he had ever felt. "Father," he said, voice hushed, "it's ours, isn't it?" Yorick ran his thumb over the summit badge that hung around his neck, the polished emblem of a moment Earth had been forced to stand alone. "It's something they said we would never build. Something they said we couldn't." The boy pressed his hand to the display, eyes tracing the faint outlines of the angular hull. On the Harrow's Bastion, the 3 recon destroyers fanned out in a triangular approach, data bursts feeding back into Varlin's console. "Delta 2, approach vector locked," came a comm report. "Minimal scan pulses, this thing is..." "Captain, it's bigger than the Alliance's Sunder class. No visible weapon mounts, but..." The feed crackled and washed out in static. Delta 2, repeat. No response. Delta 3, do you have visuals? A voice, ragged and cracked by static, cut through. Gravity distortions, Captain. We're getting pulled, no, redirected. The core readouts keep phasing, like it's rewriting local gravity. Another pulse of silence, broken by one final whisper through the comm line. Words spoken without breath, as though the speaker saw more than data. That can't be human. Is that real? Thren's jaw tightened, eyes flickering to Varlin. Varlin swallowed. We lost Delta 3's transponder. Delta 4's feed is disintegrating, no coherent data stream. The deck beneath them seemed to hold its breath, though the engines rumbled in their deep wells. The air tasted of iron and sweat, every man's pulse a drumbeat in the confined space. Yurik Varnis turned to his son, voice low. They thought we had fallen, that we would never rise again. The boy's lips pressed together in a thin line. Then let them see this. Let them see what we never surrendered. On Elvarin 3, the Earth Embassy stood as a sealed relic. No Terran had set foot there since the final day. Dust lay thick on the crests of Earth's banner, every star traced in dull relief, its edges scored by decades of neglect. The Alliance Council Chamber, Admiral Kryn, whose name now carried the weight of absolute rule, dismissed the chatter of lesser voices. Humanity's sector is marked as neutral because they cannot mount a threat, he said. These are pirate salvage remnants, nothing more. File a report, keep the council calm. Earth's name does not belong in our directive. Yet outside the great windows of the chamber, the stars shifted, as if listening for the name he would not speak. Thren turned from the heads-up display to the men on his bridge. Keep every sensor locked. We will not move until we know. A low murmur spread across the watch stations as the anomaly's readings pulsed. It was not conquest in those numbers. It was something far older, something that waited with the patience of a world that had endured. The Harrow's Bastion held formation, data streams weaving like threads in a loom, each one a testament to a single truth. Earth had not been broken. It had been watching. And now, at the heart of the gravefield, something built in the long shadows of loss had taken shape. Yurik's hand clenched around his summit badge, his son's breath steady beside him. Thren's eyes narrowed, voice a low growl to his officers. Lock this image. Let the record show what waits for any who believed Earth would fade away. Commander Varric Solin's gaze fixed on the data relay, lines of code and schematics shimmering across layered overlays that formed an elaborate tapestry of intent. His breath drew tight as he reached for the image of his daughter pinned to the console. A face he would never see in the flesh again. A promise, unbroken. He turned to his team gathered around the holotable's real-gate projection. Gentlemen, we stand at the junction of remembrance and recompense. They think Earth retreated. They believe our resolve was buried in the dust of embargo. They are wrong. He stepped closer, fingers tracing the edge of the console. Operation Mirage was never a gamble. It was forged from the ruin they forced upon us, shaped by every whisper they refused to hear. Lieutenant Brandarin's eyes flickered across the data layers, his voice measured. The Verge's systems are aligned, every logic node primed to react to incursion attempts. The course pulses steady, Commander. It's awaiting an ignition, an act of aggression. Solon nodded, his tone cutting through the weight of the room. They prodded the Verge in the grave field. Now they will see that it is not a relic, but a culmination. The room shifted under the weight of purpose, every breath carrying the scent of ionized circuits and old oil. The first order came not as a shout but a crisp directive. Initiate sequence Delta 1. Let the Verge drift, but stand by for denial field deployment. Outside, the Verge loomed in silent gravitation, its composite skin drawing sensor pulses inward, repurposing every probe's echo. On the Alliance flagship, Captain Thren braced as data flashes erupted across his bridge. Gravity signatures, oscillating field patterns. It's pulling resources from our own scanners. Commander Varlin's gloved hand worked the console, his eyes narrowing. It's not responding to our hails. It's folding the data back on us, like it's reflecting our own scans. Thren barked an order. Full spectrum analysis. Don't let it dictate our approach. But every signal returned, twisted, echoes of their own aggression staring back at them. In Solin's command chamber, screens tracked the slow, calculated dance of the Verge. Maintain broadcast silence, he ordered. Let them guess. Let them wonder how deep the abyss stretches. Axel's voice remained steady. The Core's ready to execute Phase 1 of Mirage. Local denial fields can be projected to 20 clicks. Alliance vessels will see a dead field. No data in, no data out. Solin's lips tightened, a flicker of resolve hardening his gaze. They cut our lifelines once. Now they will feel what it means to be cut off. On Irendor, in the dimmed dome of the Varnis homestead, Yorick's son sat cross-legged before an old datapad, watching the restricted channels through a neighbor's cracked relay link. The boy's heart thudded in rhythm with every flicker of the Verge's outline. Really can't stop it, can they? He asked, voice trembling yet unwavering. Yorick placed a hand on his son's shoulder, the weight of that touch grounding them both. They'll try. They'll flinch and falter. But they'll learn that Earth never forgot how to hold the line. Back in the command hub, Solin's breath fogged the viewport's edge. Execute denial field deployment. The Verge responded without a flicker of ceremony. Shimmering distortions rippled from its hull, folding local space in an intricate lattice that severed every inbound and outbound transmission. Thren's eyes widened as the feeds on his ship stuttered. What's happening to our comm relays? Report. Varlin's jaw worked as he struggled with dead consoles. We're cut off. Every channel's locked out, like we're trapped in a box of our own making. The Verge's systems moved with mechanical grace, each logic node a reflection of Earth's final resolve. Solin's voice cut through the tense quiet of his deck. Let them see their simulations turned against them. Let them learn that Earth's memory is a weapon sharper than any blade. Alliance ships in the gray field scrambled, hulls vibrating as sensors flickered with false returns. Every pulse they sent twisted back, turned to shadows they could not chase. On Arendor, children pressed close to the cracked relay screens, eyes wide as the Verge's might unfolded without a single shot fired. Yorick's breath was a quiet exhalation, not of fear, but of something closer to release. For every ship we lost to embargo, for every colony they left to starve, this is our testament. Solin turned from the viewport, his team's eyes locked on him. You know what they see out there? His tone was low, a growl of calm certainty. They see their own tactics return to sender. They see themselves in the abyss. Lieutenant Brand's hand moved to the console again, confirming updates. The core's holding stable. The Verge can adapt to their next move. Solin nodded. Then we let it. No escalation unless they force it. This is a deterrent, not a conquest. The weight of that distinction settled into the room. It was not about proving superiority. It was about letting the Alliance see the folly of underestimating a people who had learned to fight with absence itself. Across the black of the gray field, the Verge drifted without fanfare. Its presence was an answer to every assumption that had once dismissed Earth as broken. A single recon pilot's feed flared back to life, a final fragment of data before vanishing. His voice was hoarse, every word punctuated by a shiver of fear and awe. It's not even moving. It's waiting for us to realize. It doesn't have to. Thren's hand gripped the rail so hard the synthetic grip bit into his palm. Pull back the recon teams. We need to rethink. Back in Solin's command chamber, the final relay of the Verge's adaptive core flickered across the console. Every shift of the field was logged, every maneuver stored, like a promise made to a future that would never again be dictated by foreign councils. He reached once more for the image of his daughter, his thumb tracing the contours of her smile. For her, for every Terran who waited for the stars, to remember who we are. Outside, the Verge's hull reflected no light, no promise of dialogue. It was an answer carved in gravitational force, a testament to a world that had been forced to grow quiet, but had never ceased to think, to remember, to prepare. Yurik's son turned from the screen, eyes meeting his father's. What happens now? Yurik's lips curved into a thin, knowing line. Now. We watch. And we let them see what it means when Earth remembers. The command deck of the Alliance flagship Sovereign Blade buzzed with activity as Admiral Kren stood before the central display, his gaze fixed on the holographic projection of the Harnell's Ark. The debris field, a remnant of a long-forgotten battle, now served as the staging ground for the Alliance's latest maneuver. "Status report," Kren demanded, his voice cutting through the chatter. "The battle group elements are in position," replied Commander Thalos, "awaiting your command." Kren nodded, his expression unreadable. "Initiate Operation Constrictor. Let's see how the Terrans respond." Across the fleet, ships powered up their systems, weapons primed and shields activated. The plan was simple: surround the Axiom Verge and force it into submission. But as the Alliance ships moved into formation, something unexpected occurred. A ripple in space appeared above the Harnell's Ark, distorting the starlight and bending the very fabric of reality. The Axiom Verge emerged, its hull shimmering with an otherworldly glow. It hadn't traveled through conventional means. It had tunneled through space itself, utilizing gravitational lensing to arrive undetected. "Admiral, the Verge has arrived," Talos reported, his voice tinged with disbelief. Kren's eyes narrowed. "Hold position. Do not engage until I give the order." The Axiom Verge hovered silently, its presence imposing. Then, without warning, 3 of the Alliance's flagships powered down, their systems rendered inert by an unseen force. The ships drifted aimlessly, their crews scrambling to regain control. "Electromagnetic collapse fields," Thalos muttered. "They've disabled our ships without firing a single shot." Kren's fists clenched. This was supposed to be a show of force, not a slaughter. Back on Arendor, the Varnish family watched the events unfold on their makeshift display. Cheers erupted as the Axiom Verge demonstrated its superiority. "Double underestimated us," Yorick Varnish said, his voice filled with pride. A transmission from Earth crackled through the comms. "This was your simulation, we finished it." The message sent shockwaves through the Alliance. Their own strategies had been used against them, their simulations turned into reality by the very adversary they sought to control. Admiral Kren stared at the display, the weight of his miscalculations evident on his face. "We need to reassess our approach," he said quietly. The Axiom Verge remained motionless, a silent testament to Earth's resurgence. The Alliance had been humbled, their arrogance laid bare. On Arendor, the Varnese family embraced, their hope rekindled. The galaxy would never again doubt humanity's resolve. The Axiom Verge lingered in the outer rim of Harnell's Ark, drifting like a dark reflection in a galaxy that had never dared name Earth's ghosts aloud. Inside the command chamber of the Sovereign Blade, Admiral Kren's expression twisted in the harsh light of the bridge's battle lens. Sweat clung to his hairline, and he pressed a knuckle into the console's edge. Feeling the smooth ridges bite his skin. "Bring the decoy fleet to full readiness," he snapped. "Mask the signatures deeper. Show them what they think they see." His officers worked in silence, tapping out strings of commands that rippled through the air, each keystroke a testament to a strategy built on layered deception. Across the main display, ship icons flared bright with Terran identifiers. Thermal patterns, profile echoes, everything down to the distortion trails of ancient Earth drives. "Decoy fleet is mimicking Terran beacon modulations exactly," reported Commander Arvek, his voice steady but tight. "It should provoke a response." "Good," Kren growled. "They'll come to confirm it. Then we'll trap them." He watched the simulation play out, the cold blue of the data overlays casting thin shadows across his face. His plan was simple. Use the Terran image against itself. Show Earth what it believed it could not ignore, and turn their caution into a snare. In the control chamber of the Verge, Commander Vark Solon stood with one hand pressed to the console's cool surface. The Verge's inner core read the false signals flooding the region, its logic web pulsing with faint color as it mapped the decoy fleet's approach. Solon's face was calm, but his shoulders were set, each breath deliberate, the faint tang of coolant lingering in the recirculated air. "They're confident," said Brandiran, his words quiet as he studied the data ribbons dancing across his own console. "They're banking everything on the assumption that we're still playing by the rules they wrote." Solon gave a slow nod. "Initiate the lattice. Let's see how they handle seeing their reflection in our silence." The Verge responded instantly, its command lattice unfolding in smooth layers that wrapped the decoy fleet in a shroud of shifting interference. Each Alliance signal was absorbed, rechanneled, then spat back along corridors that twisted through data echoes. The Verge didn't just jam, it understood. It read the scripts of the Alliance's war doctrine and turned them back, one protocol at a time. On the bridge of the Sovereign Blade, the first sign of trouble flickered in the form of a ship status cascade. Tiny alerts, easy to ignore at first, then they multiplied, each one a crack in the Alliance's perfect geometry. "Admiral," Arvak said, strain threading through the clipped syllables. "Our decoy fleet's command links are fluctuating. Control is... It's not responding as expected." Kren's lips drew tight. "Run the redundancy paths again. They're probably trying to scramble our reads." "Sir, it's not interference. The commands are they're being mirrored. Every order we give is sent back at us, layered into false command signals." A pause. Kren's jaw worked as he took in the realization. "They're turning our drills against us." The decoy fleet had stopped moving, in formation, each ship drifting at odd angles, their engine lines cold and blank in the sensor feeds. They were puppets now, strings cut not by violence, but by a logic deeper than any simulation they had drilled. A murmur spread along the command deck, officers exchanging glances as their readings went dead. Kren's fingers flexed against the console, nails rapping in a rhythm that felt too loud. On the cold plains of Arendor, Uric Varnus gathered the children of the dome in a circle. The air inside the small gathering room smelled faintly of dust and the sweet tang of boiled grain broth still cooling on the stove. He set the old summit badge in the center of the table, the faded metal catching the single hanging light's glow. "He thought this was the end of Earth," he said, his voice filling the room like a quiet drumbeat, a mark of surrender, of a promise we wouldn't keep. He paused, drawing in the children's focused stares. What the Verge showed them wasn't weapons or fleets, it was the memory of who we are, of what we're willing to defend. One boy, maybe 10, leaned forward, fingers curled tight around his knees. "They couldn't stop it," he said softly, "because it wasn't about fighting. It was about not letting them own the memory of Earth." Yorick nodded. "Exactly. The Verge didn't move to destroy them. It let them see themselves in the reflection of our refusal. They gave us a stage. We turned it into a mirror." In the Alliance's council chamber on Namaris, Chief Analyst Vorn Dallin sat in a pool of data flickers, the heat of the lamp above him a harsh weight on his scalp. He stared at the last composite feed from the decoy fleet, every simulation overlay stuttering, every projected outcome warped by the Verge's control. He closed his eyes, breath catching. "We didn't detect a warship," he whispered to the empty room. "We detected a doctrine. We detected a memory so stubborn it turned every one of our tactics inside out." He rose from his seat, unfastening the rank insignia from his collar. The small metal badge clinked against the console as he set it down, a final act of acknowledgement that no simulation had prepared them for. He walked from the chamber without another word. In the Verge's control room, Solon watched the final data traces fade from the interface. The display's light washed over his face, leaving his eyes shadowed beneath the sharp lines of his brow. "They'll think this was just a move," he said to Bran, his voice low. "They'll miss the lesson. They always do." Bran shifted his weight, the deck beneath him carrying the distant vibration of life support circulators. "And the lesson?" Solon's fingers drummed once on the edge of the console. "That no doctrine survives the memory of those who refuse to be written out." Outside the dome on Arendor, Yorick Varnus stepped into the cold night. His breath steamed as he looked up at the stars, each point of light a promise of all the futures they had reclaimed. Behind him, the children's voices rose in quiet conversation, their words weaving together a tapestry of what they had learned, lessons of strength that needed no war to prove them real. The decoy fleet drifted in the cold dark, each ship a hollow echo of a plan that had failed to understand the simple truth of human will. In that drifting, there was no triumph, no declaration, only the quiet proof that Earth had never needed an audience to remember who it was. In the command chamber, Solon watched the final feed blink out, the last echoes of the Alliance's simulation fading to nothing. He let out a breath and turned from the console, his stride measured as he left the room behind. The galaxy would remember the day Earth stopped answering questions it had never needed to ask. Commander Varric Solon watched the last of the decoy fleet's data collapse on his console, the feed ending in a final flicker of null code. His hand hovered over the final transmission log as he shifted his weight on the reinforced floor panels, the smell of stale composite and recycled air filling his lungs. Each movement was deliberate, each breath measured. "Patch me through to the neutral block secure line," he said to Bran Darren, who stood at the relay interface, his shoulders stiff, posture as straight as the thin data columns rising around him. Bran worked the controls, the soft clack of keys the only sound between them. A cold voice cut through the line, carrying the weight of diplomatic caution. "Commander Solon, we were informed this was a Terran-only channel. State your purpose." Solon's gaze didn't waver, though the small laser status lights flickered across his profile. "This is Earth's only message. Plan against Sol again, and Phase Archon will answer." His tone was flat, leaving no room for questions. The line stayed open for a long moment, static tickling the air. Then it cut out, leaving only the sound of Sol's calm breathing. He turned away, his expression as unreadable as the dark reflection of his own eyes in the cold glass of the viewport. Bran shifted at his station, his fingers tightening around the edge of the console. "Commander, do you believe they'll understand what Phase Archon truly means?" "They'll understand enough," Solon said, his voice as low as the gravity that anchored them to the floor. Rumors filled the gaps in any silence. Let them do the rest. On the cold ground of Arendor, Yorick Varnus gathered his neighbors in the low-lit dome hall. The children sat at the front, their faces pale in the flickering glow of old relay units, patched and coaxed back to life after decades of disuse. The glass of the dome windows creaked faintly as thermal shifts played across the surface. One of the elders, a man with hair like tarnished copper wire, asked the question every man in the room had been holding back. "Is it true, Yorick? Did Earth truly threaten them with something they can't even name?" Yorick's voice was calm, his hands folded around the summit badge he never let go of. "It wasn't a threat," he said slowly, each word weighted with the history of a people who'd been made to wait too long. "It was a reminder. Earth doesn't broadcast plans. Earth shows them. Phase Archon isn't a weapon you see. It's a promise that no simulation can contain." He let the words settle, the children's wide eyes following every syllable. Outside the dome, the night air turned cold enough to crack the thin layers of frost along the old corridor rails, a tactile echo of the weight in the room. Back in the Alliance's central command, Admiral Kryn's hands rested against the console edge as he read the decrypted message from Solon. His breath misted against the cold glass of the viewport, his eyes fixed on the star maps slowly shifting in front of him. "Phase Archon," he muttered, the syllables foreign in his mouth. Commander Thalos, standing beside him, shifted his weight, the fabric of his uniform whispering with the movement. "Sir, what do you think it means? Another ship? Some form of planet-scale bombardment system? No direct data supports either." Kryn cut him off with a glance sharp enough to carve through the question. "No one's sure. That's the point. Rumors will spread through the neutral blocks and the outer worlds, each rumor more dangerous than the one before it. That uncertainty will weigh on every council chamber until they're forced to see Earth not as a broken world, but as something they can't predict. The words settled around them like cold iron. In the data wells of the central archives, analysts worked in silence, every new scan feeding into the growing tangle of half-formed possibilities and shadowed fears. On Arendor, Yorick's son watched the gathering through the cracked relay, his breath forming a small fog against the cold glass as he leaned closer. "Father," he asked in a voice that trembled but did not falter. "What if they don't understand?" Yorick looked at his son with the weight of old scars in his eyes. "Then they'll learn, and if they don't, they'll see what happens when you treat memory as weakness." In the private chamber of the neutral block, envoys spoke in low tones, eyes darting as they traded data sticks and whispered threats. "The transmission was short," one said, fingers drumming the table. "But every word was chosen to leave a scar." The room smelled faintly of chemical sealant and the dry cold of recirculated air, a tang that caught in the throat. "Next question," another envoy said, "is whether the Alliance will believe that Earth is bluffing." A thin smile curved his lips as he met the gaze of the others. "Or if they'll remember that Earth doesn't bluff." Back on the Verge's command deck, Solon studied the final readouts of the decoy fleet's collapse, each frame a testament to the quiet devastation of Doctrine turned against its creators. Bren shifted beside him, his voice tight with something close to awe. "Commander, the Alliance's chatter is in disarray. They're trying to recalibrate the entire frontier defense doctrine." "Let them," Solon said. "Every recalibration is an admission that Earth isn't what they thought. That is Phase Archon's real power. It doesn't have to exist in the way they understand. It exists because they can't afford to be wrong about it." The last of the decoy signals blinked off the display, and the data room fell quiet. Selin reached for the console's edge, feeling the slight give of the polymer under his fingers, grounding himself in the tactile memory of Earth's refusal to bow. "We didn't fight to conquer them," he said softly. "We showed them the shape of their own fear." Outside, the Verge drifted in the cold shadows of Jupiter's outer rim, its hull dark and inscrutable. It bore no banners, no sign of conquest. It was the shape of a memory given form, a memory that refused to be written out by those who had never understood it. And in the sealed halls of every neutral block, the name Phase Archon became a quiet prayer and a loud warning, a word that slipped through the cracks of council walls and echoed in the private spaces where the future was decided. On Arendor, Yorick rose from the circle of children, his back straight, the weight of the summit badge a promise in the hollow of his hand. "Earth has nothing to prove," he said, voice low and certain. "And nothing to fear." In that final breath of tension, the galaxy's maps shifted, not because Earth had fired the first shot, but because it had refused to let anyone else write its final chapter. The Verge hovered above Jupiter's banded storms, its composite hull a dark silhouette against the muted glow of the gas giant. The ship's systems had gone dark, the last logic pulses flickering out as if the vessel itself had exhaled. No flare of light marked the shutdown, no ceremony for what it had accomplished. It simply settled into the cold quiet of orbit, a silent shape that carried the memory of everything Earth had been forced to defend. Commander Varric Solon stood at the viewport of the Reconstitution Directorate's observation platform. The hull's reflective sheen turned to a dull sheen under the low lights of the chamber. His breath clouded faintly in the recycled air, the taste of synthetic scrubbers and the hint of machine oil always present. His fingers tapped lightly on the reinforced glass, each motion measured, as though the weight of the moment had sunk into his bones. "Phase Archon is concluded," he said quietly. The words were for himself as much as for the small circle of officers gathered behind him. The final operation, Operation Mirage, had ended not with victory, but with the simple decision to end. That was Earth's answer, and it was enough. Lieutenant Brand Darren watched the ship's silhouette shift slowly as Jupiter's gravity drew it into a stable drift. "Sir," he said, his voice as low as the hush that filled the room. "The Alliance's updated map logs have already sealed Earth's sector as neutral, trade routes rerouted, Sensor buoys deactivated. They're treating Sol as if it's an old wound they don't dare probe again. Solon gave a single nod. Let them. His eyes traced the slow rotation of the Verge's hull, every angle of its structure a quiet testament to the idea that Earth's strength had never been about the size of its ships or the reach of its weapons. Bran hesitated, his hand resting on the console. And the Verge itself, sir? The Corps' shutdown routines are final, but there's no way to be certain what might reawaken if someone tries to prod it again. Let them wonder, Solon said. That uncertainty is worth more than any ship's cannon. They see it drift and they'll remember. That's the only monument Earth ever needed. He turned from the viewport, his boots making the faintest scuff on the deck plating. The overhead lights threw long shadows behind him, broken only by the muted glimmer of status indicators, set to permanent standby. Each green glow was a heartbeat stilled, a system that would never again answer a command. In the data vault beneath the deck, the final mission logs were sealed. Brand keyed in the last command, his fingers moving with a careful rhythm. Operation Mirage. Final entry logged and archived, he reported. The weight of that statement seemed to settle the air itself. Solon took the data stick from him, turning it over in his hand. The plastic was smooth, but the heat of the processors within had left it faintly warm, a small living echo of everything it contained. Store it, he said. We built the Verge to remind them. It did its work. Now it rests. In the dark halls of the neutral blocks, word of the Verge's final drift had spread quickly, though no official statement had been issued. Diplomats spoke of it in low voices, their phrases punctuated by the soft tap of boots on cold marble floors. They debated what Earth's refusal meant, how it would shift the balance of trade and trust, in a galaxy that had always assumed Earth's silence meant surrender. On Arendor, the Varnis family gathered in the low warmth of their dome, the red light of a distant sun filtering through the cracked panels. Yorick sat with his son beside the central table, the summit badge between them. His fingers moved over the worn metal, tracing each scratch and groove with the same care he might have given to a fresh wound. They'll look at that ship, he said, his voice steady, and they'll remember that Earth never asked permission to exist. They'll see the quiet orbit it holds and understand that our silence isn't absence. It's choice. His son leaned forward, the faint scent of old soil and dried grain filling the small room. And us, Father. What do we do now that it's over? Yorick met his son's gaze without hesitation. We remember. That's what they never counted on. Memory isn't a weapon, it's a boundary. And that's why they can't cross it. In the council chambers of the Alliance, maps were redrawn with slow deliberation. The sector around Sol was marked with a thin line of caution tape in the data overlays. Nothing within, nothing beyond. A region set to be left untouched. Not out of respect, but out of the cold knowledge that some victories are not measured in conquered systems or treaties signed under duress. Commander Solon stepped back from the viewport, the final shape of the Verge shrinking in the distance. His hand reached into his jacket pocket, closing around the small holodisc of his daughter's last smile. The soft glow of the image pressed into his palm, the last promise he had to keep. Lock down the core, Bran, he said. His voice carried no triumph, no echo of vengeance, only the finality of a choice made. The Verge was never meant to be a warship. It was a statement. Let it drift. Bran keyed the command, the final lines of the Verge's operational code locking into permanent hibernation. The console lights dimmed and the chamber fell into a hush that felt as complete as the final breath of a dying star. Outside, Jupiter turned slowly, its storms churning in an endless dance that cared nothing for human memory or the fears of distant empires. The Verge followed the giant's path, a quiet witness to the galaxy's turning seasons. Yorick rose from the table, his back straight despite the years that had curved his shoulders. He set the summit badge back on the worn wood, the quiet weight of it enough to anchor every breath he took. They thought they'd erased us, he said softly, his voice carrying to the corners of the dome. They thought memory could be unmade by embargoes and neglect. His son's eyes held the reflection of that badge, the faint glint of the single lamp catching the edges of the worn metal. But we remembered. In the observation platform, Solon turned his back on the drifting ship and let the last message settle into the air. "That's all Earth ever needed," he said, a final murmur that reached no further than the men beside him. Not conquest, not vengeance, only the quiet right to stand where we always have. And as the data streams ended and the final commands locked into place, the galaxy found itself forced to reckon with a new border. Not one marked by war fleets or blockades, but by the memory of a ship that refused to answer to anyone's command but Earth's own. Ulrich Varnes stood at the edge of the teaching circle, the low light of the dome's central lamp casting long shadows across the rough ground. The cold air smelled of earth that had been turned and retuned in stubborn harvests, each breath of it a taste of the life they refused to let slip away. He turned a worn summit badge in his palm, the groove smoothed by years of habit. Around him, children settled in close, their bodies radiating the quiet energy of curiosity. The muted creak of boots on compacted dirt was the only sound as they waited for him to speak. "Look at this," Yorick began, his voice quiet but carrying. He held the badge high, letting the lamp's glow catch on its battered edges. "This is more than a mark of the past. It's the memory of every man and woman who refused to let someone else write our story." The children watched the badge with wide eyes, their breath misting faintly in the cold of the dome. A boy in the front, his hair still uneven from an older brother's clumsy shears, shifted forward. "Why do we keep these, Father? Why do we polish them every year?" Urich's hand lowered, fingers tightening around the badge, "Because it reminds us that even when the galaxy turned away, Earth did not forget itself. The Verge's stand was more than a tactic, it was a lesson. And a lesson doesn't die when the battle ends." He set the badge on the table's rough wood, the faint scuff of metal on grain filling the moment of silence that followed. Around him, the children leaned in, the quiet crackle of the lamp's power cell a rhythm beneath their steady breathing. Outside the dome, wind rattled the outer panels, the whisper of red dust against the seals a constant presence. In that sound, the memory of old embargoes and the lean years of ration lines still lived, but it was memory, not destiny. Yorick gestured to the summit banner that hung along the far wall, its colors dulled by decades of exposure. "We hang these not for the color or the pattern," he said, his tone level. "We hang them because they are the promise that Earth cannot be erased by the forgetting of others." A girl, her coat patched with strips of old storage tarp, raised her hand. "Does it scare them?" she asked. "The badges, the stories?" "It should," Yorick said, meeting her eyes. "Not because of what we might do, but because of what we will never surrender. That is harder for them to understand than any weapon." Beyond the teaching circle, older colonists gathered in small knots, the air around them smelling of heating coils and warm broth, carried from the communal kitchen. They spoke in low voices, their words not of war but of planting schedules, water rations, and the quiet strength of routine. Each man wore a summit badge polished to a dull gleam. Some had traded the Alliance's issued uniforms for patched jackets and field-worn coveralls, but none had let the memory of that last day in the council chamber fade. Yorick's son, taller now, stood at his shoulder. He had watched his father's face carefully through every word, as though he might catch the weight of the years in the lines around his mouth. "You taught them to see the badge," he said quietly. "Not just as a relic, but as a sign." Yorick looked at him, pride tightening in his chest. "We do not need the Alliance's approval to know our worth," he said. "We only need to remember who we are, and to teach it in every quiet breath." On the far side of the dome, a small shrine had been built from scrap panels and battered cargo containers. It was not a place of worship, but a place of memory. Names had been etched into the metal with careful strokes, the names of those lost to embargoes, to hunger, to the slow theft of hope that had once been Earth's only inheritance. A woman knelt there, her fingers tracing the names one by one. She did not weep. Her face was calm, eyes dry in the cold. Each name was a promise she carried forward, a history that would not be buried beneath the shifting politics of distant worlds. The children rose slowly as Yarick finished speaking, their movements careful, deliberate. Each reached out to touch the summit badge where it rested, a silent pledge written in the faint tremble of their fingers. One by one they filed past him, the echoes of their footsteps a quiet testament to the future that waited in every breath. Yorick watched them go, his eyes steady as the weight of memory settled in the dome's air. When the last child had stepped back into the circle of lamplight, Yorick turned to his son. "The verge drifts now," he said, the words even, each one a final marker in the long line of Terran memory. "It drifts, and the galaxy remembers. But we do not drift. We remain." His son nodded, the line of his jaw set with a certainty that had taken root in the red dust of Arindor. "We remember," he said. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint rustle of distant fields, the slow, patient sound of seeds waiting for the warmth of the sun. In that sound, there was no promise of conquest or retribution, only the quiet breath of life that refused to be silenced. Inside the dome, Yorick reached for the summit badge one final time, pressing it to his chest as he closed his eyes. Around him, the children's voices had grown again, low and steady, weaving the stories he had taught them into a new tapestry. The badge was old, the metal dulled and the lines worn smooth, but it was enough. More than enough. In the end, that was Earth's final gift to its children, the memory of what it meant to stand unbroken, even in the shadow of those who had once believed they could decide Earth's place among the stars. Commander Varric Solon stood at the observation deck's edge, the reinforced window cool against his forehead as he watched the Verge drift in orbit above Jupiter. The gas giant's layered storms turned slowly below, their muted colors washed in the glow of the station's minimal lights. The deck's faint vibrations echoed in the soles of his boots, a reminder of the machinery still ticking away beneath the silence of this final vigil. He lifted the small holodisc from his breast pocket and pressed his thumb against the ridged surface. It flickered to life with a muted shimmer, and the image of his daughter's smiling face glowed softly in the dim room. The tiny projection trembled in his palm, the faint crackle of the relay circuits cutting the quiet like a breath caught in a throat. His voice, low and measured, carried across the empty deck. "You asked me once why we kept waiting, why we refused to answer the Alliance's demands with a show of fire or a parade of threats." He paused, eyes locked on the faint outline of the Verge, the shape of it anchored against the endless cold of the stars. "I didn't have the words then. Now I do." The last command to the Verge had already been entered, each line of code locked down and final. No further maneuvers, no hidden escalation. It would drift there, a witness that needed no further orders to hold its ground. He watched its unlit hull and let the weight of the years settle into the stillness of his breath. "Simulation complete," he murmured. The phrase had become Earth's final transmission, broadcast to the councils of the galaxy in measured tones that offered no hint of gloating. Those 2 words had spoken every truth the Alliance had tried to bury beneath trade embargoes and diplomatic silences. Those 2 words had closed a chapter without apology. On the far side of the observation deck, Lieutenant Bran Darren waited near the console, his stance as rigid as the metal handrail at his side. He had seen every report, every adjustment of the Alliance's trade lanes in response to the quiet presence of the Verge. He cleared his throat and spoke with deliberate calm. "Sir, the galaxy's charts are already updated. Earth's sector is a blank in their maps now. No patrols, no supply lines, now they don't know what to call it anymore." "They don't need to," Solon said. He let the words stand on their own, simple and final. "They know enough." Outside the reinforced glass, the Verge's hull was dark and unyielding, a shape that had no need for explanation. It bore no flags, offered no threats. It simply was, a memory given form and allowed to exist without question. Bran shifted his weight, his fingers flexing around the data stick he held. Commander, do you think they understand what it meant? The difference between victory and memory? Solon turned to him, his face drawn and lined by the years of choices that had led to this moment. They'll debate it, they'll argue about what Phase Archon really was, whether it was a weapon or a ghost. Let them. He looked back to the drifting verge, each line of its hull a testament to quiet refusal. We didn't build it to be understood. We built it so no one could ever say again that Earth's voice didn't matter. The observation deck was quiet but for the faint click of the environmental regulators cycling the air. Beyond that, there was only the steady beat of Solon's heart in his ears and the cold finality of the stars. On Arendor, Yorick Varnus stood in the dome's communal hall, his fingers brushing the summit badge pinned to his coat. Around him, the low conversation of families merged with the scent of baking grain and the soft tap of children's feet against the packed dirt floor. The news had already reached them. Earth's final words. The quiet refusal to be diminished. A neighbor, older and stooped by years of ration lines, spoke softly. They're already calling it the day the galaxy blinked. He shook his head, a quiet smile turning his mouth. Not a war, not a treaty, just a truth they couldn't ignore. Yorick nodded, his hand still over the badge. It's what we always hoped for, he said, his voice a thread of warmth in the cold air. A memory that was too strong to break. In the small shrine at the dome's edge, the children placed small tokens, scraps of old cloth, bits of polished alloy, each one a quiet promise. They spoke no words, their eyes steady as they pressed each offering into place. They had learned that the weight of memory was not in noise or fury, but in the simple act of remembering. Back in the observation deck, Solon turned the holodisk over in his hand, feeling the slight give of the casing under his thumb. His daughter's image still flickered softly, her smile as bright as the day she'd last seen the son of Earth. He let the quiet stretch for a moment, then spoke in a voice that reached only her. We did it for you, he said. Not for conquest, not for pride. For the promise that you would never be a footnote in someone else's story. He pressed the disk's edge, deactivating the image. The projection faded, leaving only the cold reflection of the verge in the glass. It drifted there still, untouched by the questions of those who had once claimed dominion over Earth's memory. Commander, Brant said, his voice breaking the hush. The transmission logs are sealed. The final entry is marked with your authorization. Solon gave a single nod. Let them be the last words they ever hear from us. No threat, no promise. Just that one truth. He stepped back from the viewport, the weight of the years folding around him like a second skin. Earth has nothing to prove. We never did. He let his gaze linger one last time on the verge, the silent shape that had closed a circle of their refusal. Then he turned away, his footsteps slow and measured on the cold deck plating. Each step was a final act of memory. No triumph, no ceremony. Only the surety of a world that had refused to forget itself. In that final whisper, the galaxy shifted, not because Earth had spoken loudly, but because it had spoken at all. We hope this story stirred something within you. The galaxy listened, and so did we. Which part of Earth's final stand resonated most with you? Share your thoughts below, and let us know what stories of human courage and defiance you'd like to see next. If you felt the weight of memory and the quiet triumph of Earth's refusal, give this story a like and subscribe for more journeys that push the boundaries of the stars. Your voice matters here. Let it echo.